and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A really busy show tonight. One of the most experienced and respected journalists in the country, Peter Hitchens, will be my Mark Meets guest. The guy is incredible, and he'll be talking COVID restrictions, China, Boris, and his long career in Fleet Street. This is a guy that's never boring and is often on the right side of history. In the big question, will we have face coverings forever? I'm going to speak to the author of a brand new book full of data about whether they work or not. So find out the answer to that one at 9:20. Plus, another great British game show, my all-star panel, my alternative news headlines at 10, and in my big opinion monologue, lockdown cheerleaders, a damaged country is on you. Plus, Adele is my new hero. Or heroine. She, her? I'm so confused. See you after the headlines with Bethany.
Thanks, Mark. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. The Foreign Office is urging British nationals to leave Ukraine while commercial means are still available. Speaking in Moscow earlier, the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace warned Russia could invade Ukraine at any time. Russia has repeatedly denied plans to invade its neighbour, despite placing more than 100,000 troops at the border. Ben Wallace says he hopes there's a way forward after today's talks.
I was clear about the tragic consequences that any invasion of Ukraine could have. We listened to the assurances given by Minister Shoigu and indeed General Gerasimov that they would not invade Ukraine. And we urged dialogue as a way through to address any concerns that the Russian government may have.
President Joe Biden is also urging US nationals to leave Ukraine. It comes as America's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, is warning that Russia is prepared to launch an attack within the next week.
We are in the window when an invasion could begin at any time, should Vladimir Putin decide to order it. I will not comment on the details of our intelligence information, but I do want to be clear. It could begin during the Olympics, despite a lot of speculation that it would only happen after the Olympics.
In other news, the Home Secretary says the next Metropolitan Police Commissioner, who will replace Dame Cressida Dick, faces stark challenges. Priti Patel says the culture at the force and the behaviour of its officers needs an overhaul by a new leader. GB News' Home and Security Editor Mark White has this update.
Here at the Home Office, Priti Patel has confirmed that she has now begun the process to find a new Metropolitan Police Commissioner. Any replacement for Cressida Dick, she says, would have to show strong and decisive leadership to deal with the institutional issues that have plagued the Metropolitan Police in recent years. It is also the most political of policing roles, having to straddle the competing demands of a Labour London Mayor and a Conservative Home Secretary.
A Canadian region has declared a state of emergency in response to protests against COVID restrictions. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford says he'll urgently enact laws to crack down on interference with the free flow of goods and people. Lorry drivers have been blocking roads in the capital, Ottawa, all week. The UK economy grew by a record 7.5% in 2021, following a large fall the year before due to the pandemic. Official figures showed GDP grew by 1% in the final quarter last year, despite the impact of the Omicron variant in December. Spain has dropped its travel entry requirement for British children over the age of 12 to be vaccinated. They will only have to show proof of a recent negative COVID test instead. And fully vaccinated passengers don't need to take a test when arriving back in the UK. On TV, online and DAB radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Dolan tonight.
Many thanks to the brilliant Bethany Elsey, who returns in an hour's time. It's Friday, the 11th of February, and you're watching and listening to Mark Dolan tonight. And a big show we've got for you this evening. My Mark Meets guest is one of the most experienced and respected journalists in the country, and a man all too often on the right side of history. Peter Hitchens is live at 10, talking COVID, China, Boris, and his amazing career in Fleet Street. Will we have masks forever? We'll get the definitive answer about whether they actually work with Ian Miller, the author of a brand new book called Unmasked, which is making quite a splash. Reacting to the big stories of the day is my all-star panel tonight. Commentator and campaigner Chloe Dobbs, broadcaster and writer Alice Grant, and comedian Josh Howie. Plus, we've got another great British game show, My Alternative News headlines at 10, and we're going to review tomorrow's papers in Headliners at 11. Now, you know the highlight of my show is when I hear from you, because this programme is all about you. So drop me a line between now and 11, mark@gbnews.uk. A big 3 hours to come. It's Friday night, so uncork something Australian, or fire up the kettle and tear open the Jaffa cakes. And let's get to work. We start with good news, and England is set to be one of the freest countries in Europe, as all final COVID restrictions are to be lifted a month ahead of time. Well done to the Prime Minister for standing his ground against sage voices, many of whom are not happy with this development. The esteemed political journalist Robert Peston tweeted the following this week. Take a look at this. He tweeted, "No one in or around Sage and Nervetag is aware of any scientific advice given to the Prime Minister that the requirement to isolate for those infected with COVID-19 should be terminated from the end of the month. It's politics, isn't it?" is a typical reaction, writes Peston. Well, are these the same sage scientists who predicted up to 6,000 deaths a day without restrictions over Christmas? Here's the article in The Guardian. There it is in black and white. Perhaps those sage scientists are best ignored. Our embattled Prime Minister was responsible for Freedom Day on the 19th of July, which we were told was reckless, but cases fell. And we're currently reaping the benefits of not cancelling Christmas, with the Mail reporting today that, surprise, surprise, the economy recovered more quickly over Christmas thanks to that decision. So there's light at the end of the tunnel, and we appear to be approaching the end of this national nightmare. As Scotland and Wales persist with needless COVID measures, they're going to look increasingly isolated and out of touch. But as the tangible threat from the virus ebbs away, the colossal damage from our arrogant attempt to stop this virus will be with us not just for years, but for decades to come. And that's why tonight, folks, exclusively on this programme, I've written an open letter to those who consistently pushed for these measures in the first place and who demonised the rest of us who thought they were wrong. Here is my letter to them. Dear lockdown lovers, you cannot have a massive rise in NHS funding. You cannot fix social care. You cannot have a bigger army, more libraries, more swimming pools, or more police on the streets. You cannot have more teachers, more apprenticeships, more government grants, more fixed potholes. You cannot have a boost to mental health services. You cannot have more counter-terrorism officers, more troops for abroad, or more midwives, ambulance drivers, or ear, nose and throat surgeons here at home. You cannot have public sector pay rises. You cannot have help with your fuel bill. You cannot have lower taxes, better wages, or low inflation. You cannot have any of these things. And you can't have things that in the future you haven't even thought of yet or anticipated, like another pandemic, perhaps a worse one, a natural disaster, or a war. Those are the things you cannot have because they all require a healthy economy, something it was government policy to destroy. Shutting down once viable businesses, closing schools and gyms, and stopping healthy people from going out to work, contributing to the economy, making money for their families, and paying their bills. With lockdowns, mask mandates, social distancing, arrows in supermarkets, bubbles, stay-at-home orders, and curfews that so many pushed for, including most of the media, we have willfully destroyed the economy that pays for everything, including human life itself. There is a direct correlation between a healthy economy and a healthy society. Damaging the economy wrecks lives, but it kills too. So, lockdown cheerleaders, all of this is on you. The only thing you can have is the bill for these policies. You can have the massive non-COVID death toll, which will obviously dwarf that of COVID. And you can have the NHS waiting list, which some fear will hit 14 million people by the time we're done. You can have £500 billion worth of national debt. You can have wrecked lives and sad, illiterate kids. It became clear to me, and so many of you watching at home, that this was the wrong approach from the start. 3 weeks to flatten the curve was about long enough to prove it wouldn't work. More fool us for going along with the madness in the first place. Many of us spoke out, and we were bad people, apparently. Except that, in my view, history will judge as bad those who aggressively backed this scientifically debatable tyranny and crushed any wider discourse on the subject. People were dreadful. They dobbed in their neighbours to the police for leaving the house more than once, for not wearing a mask in a certain setting, or drinking coffee alone on the beach. So, lockdown fanatics, be proud of your legacy, because it's all on you. Now that we're left with a poorer, more divided society, it's time to think again about who the bad guys are. So many, of course, are crying out and will be crying out for massive government spending all over the shop. There are marches happening across the country tomorrow asking the government to deal with the cost of living crisis. Take a look at this. It's an advert and it's for a march that's happening tomorrow in Manchester, supported by the trade union Unite. But weren't the unions behind school closures and all of the other COVID measures? I'm so confused. You can't seek protection for an economy so obviously damaged by measures for which you previously asked. I've been a stuck record about damage to the economy, but my words and yours fell on deaf ears. The lockdown-loving masked militia will very shortly see the colossal price that we've paid for this unprecedented and, in my view, failed scientific experiment of shutting the country down for a nasty virus, yes, but one non-fatal to the vast majority. For those who pushed for lockdowns, all of this is on you. It will be the biggest I told you so in history. Now, this week saw a gender-neutral instalment of the Brit Awards. This tedious woke fest appears to have neutered its ratings as well, with among the lowest viewing figures in the show's history. Just as TV football programmes now celebrate person of the match rather than man of the match, at the Brits there is now no specific recognition for male or female singers. It obviously means that fewer awards will happen. Bad news for late great artists no longer with us like John Lennon or Aretha Franklin, who would likely have missed out on a gong back in the day under these rules, not because of the contents of their music, but because of the contents of their underwear. What hope is there for the music industry if we can't celebrate both great male and female artists? Now, if you're a trans person, that's a wonderful cause for celebration. I've got many trans friends for whom this is an important and joyous journey. But this homogenisation of categories is bad news for the art form and bad news for our wider society, because this is effectively gender ideology by the back door. So, enter stage left, the Queen of British music, Adele. We love Adele, a beautiful and talented songwriter and vocalist who rightly scooped the top award this week. But it was very telling that in her acceptance speech, she said how much she loves being a woman. Now, this has upset a few people who are calling her a TERF. Do you know what a TERF is? Apparently, it's a trans-exclusionary radical feminist and someone with gender-critical views. What does that mean in plain English? Well, it means that whilst people may identify in many different ways, and good luck to them, there are just two biological sexes. Now, I wouldn't call that gender critical. I would call that gender factual. Well, like J.K. Rowling, Adele is using her platform, her wealth and her fame to represent, celebrate and defend women. It demonstrates that not only is she a fantastic musical talent, but she's got balls as well. All of my panel tonight have balls. I'm delighted to welcome, reacting to the big stories of the day, the political commentator Alice Grant, the activist and broadcaster Chloe Dobbs, and the comedian Josh Howie. Josh, let's start with you. What was your reaction to Adele's speech in which she said she loves being a woman?
I love being a woman as well. And
so I've heard.
Very, very, very proud of it. It's great. It was great. And what I thought was most interesting about it was in the immediate aftermath, there was this real reaction online of people going, oh, is she a TERF? I'm really disappointed with her. And then there was a massive swell of support for her, and a lot of people deleted their tweets. Now, that didn't happen when J.K. Rowling released her statement a couple of years ago, and I think it just shows how brave J.K. Rowling was at the time doing that, because she did get support, but not unanimously like Adele has.
Yeah, I mean, Chloe, the bottom line is there are many fabulous trans artists in the music industry. The trans community have a colossal contribution in every walk of life. But can we not have best male singer and best female singer too?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is fantastic that Adele says that she's proud of being a woman. I don't think she should retract that comment at all, because just as you should be proud of women who have had it difficult in the past and to come up and be successful, that doesn't mean that you're not proud of the trans people as well, who have also gone through a struggle and made it. We should be celebrating women and trans, but we don't need to homogenise it all.
Yeah, what do you think about this, Alice? You, of course, like Chloe, are the younger generation. You're not a pair of oldies like Josh and I. I mean, do you think there should be some sympathy for the trans community who perhaps were possibly offended by her speech?
Well, I think what's very worrying is this radicalised, small, I hope, minority voices from young people who are so desperate to immediately attack any woman who dares to say something even remotely supporting women, which is in itself very misogynistic. And I think we've seen a lot of this, this really frightening misogyny coming from a very small minority of people who seem to be the ones with the loudest and biggest platform shouting down females. So that's what I find concerning, but obviously I hope common sense will prevail, as I think it has done with Adele and the support she's received.
Yes, I mean, she's obviously a very brave person. She's a great artist, and she's a Spurs fan as well, so she has excellent taste. Now, Alice, can I talk to you about lockdowns? We can debate, can't we, till the cows come home, whether they were the right thing to do, and I guess only history will judge. But it is clear that these measures have brought with them enormous economic consequences, which is why it sticks in the craw for me that many who called for these lockdowns are now asking for enormous government spending. I'm sorry, you can't have both.
Yes, not only that, Mark, but it's also very worrying the way the government is going to obviously have to deal with this by hiking up taxes. Not only have we been already crippled by COVID restrictions, but now the government is heading full force for the net zero policy, which would be extremely destructive to our economy. And as the Treasury admitted, will cost £1.4 trillion to achieve, which is just unbelievable. That's 70% of our GDP. And if we were to pursue the net zero policy as the government is doing, that would basically result in a doubling of our national debt, which is, as you mentioned in your monologue, which is already pretty much out of control due to lockdown. So the government must be held accountable for these policies, and I fear high taxation in the future as well. So.
Now, Josh, in more ways than one, you lean to the left. And actually, I share the progressive idea that the wealthy must pay taxes in order to benefit those more vulnerable and deserving in our society. But for me, in the event of any future pandemic, God forbid, the economy has got to come first, which in my view, over the last 2 years, it has not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally happy with you paying more taxes, Mark. I've just got to say that.
I'm skint. It's all gone.
It's that jacket.
Yeah. I've splashed the cash on the outfit tonight. I want to pay my taxes, but what I don't want to do is I don't want to bankroll what, in my view, has been a ruinous and failed scientific experiment. I think this £500 billion, Josh, it's the worst investment in the history of this country.
No, I don't think the economy comes first. I think people's lives come first. But there was a mismatch of balance of science, as you say, and I agree with many things that you said in your opening monologue.
That's a first.
The reality, I mean, I did write it. Anyway, but no, I'm joking, I didn't.
I wish you had. It'd be a lot funnier if you had.
There you go. Take credit. But there were things that were wrong. There were people who seemed to love the lockdown, and even now you see people in the street, even though there's so much evidence there that you cannot catch, people still wearing their masks out and about in the open. There are people who, obviously, like you say, dobbed in their neighbours. I remember being out with my family. We don't have a garden. We were out for 40 minutes in a park, boiling hot in that first year. And the police came over and said, "How long have you been out here?" I'm sitting there with the 2-year-old. I've got 5 kids. This is our one time out of the house. And we're like, OK, well, you've got another 20 minutes. You've got to move on. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
And I'm still angry when I think about that. And that was what was wrong, was the inability to question any of this stuff. Otherwise, you were someone who just wanted people to die.
Chloe Dobbs, I take Josh's point about human life being first. Of course, my academic argument is that the economy is the thing that preserves life, because that's what pays for the NHS and, of course, for all of our other public services. And the University of Bristol actually did a report early in the pandemic about the impact of creating the biggest recession in 300 years. They've predicted 500,000 lives being shortened as a result. No country that made itself poorer ever enjoyed better public health.
Exactly. I think people often forget the human side of the economy. People saw supporting lockdown as this choice between being human and filling the pockets of businessmen. It's really not about that. And the effects of the first lockdown and the later lockdowns did really start to show the human side of the economy as we realised that it was the poorest in society that were having the greatest impact on their lives. And now when it comes to the policy questions that we're seeing now, with, should we increase taxes, and we're seeing these rising costs of living, we need to really recognise that that was the fault of lockdowns, and that closing down the economy really has a human impact. And so it's not this false dichotomy between the economy or being human. They're so interlinked. We can't forget that.
I'm going to change my answer to Chloe's.
Yeah. I think we all want to change our answer to Chloe's. Look, I think you'll agree we're travelling business class with my amazing panel tonight. So many big topics to get through with them, including a new prison that's being called HMP 5-star. Find out why before 10. Plus, in the big question, will we be wearing masks forever? And don't forget, the legendary Mail on Sunday columnist Peter Hitchens joins me live at 10 for Mark Meets, and a bit of fun at the top of the hour at 10, my alternative news headlines. Public figures and celebrities, beware. See you in 2.
We've got a big Saturday for you on GB News. From 6 a.m, it's breakfast with Stephen and Anne. At 10, join Esther and Philip for the Saturday selection. Alistair, Darren and Nana take you through the day. And don't miss Neil Oliver Live at 7 p.m. At 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight, followed by Headliners. That's Saturday on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It was the government who put you...
I'll get to your emails very shortly, but it's time now for the big question, in which we tackle a major news story of the day. And you can actually vote in this one. We've got a Twitter poll running at GB News and mark at gbnews.uk. Should we have, and will we have face masks forever? Of course, a great debate around face coverings has raged for most of the pandemic. But do they work? Are they effective? Let's speak to a man who has crunched the numbers and looked at the data so you don't have to. The author, Ian Miller, has written Unmasked, which is getting 5-star reviews and making quite the splash. Ian, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Well, very good to have you on GB News. First of all, can you tell me why you chose to write this book?
Well, I think it's really important to kind of tell the story of what happened early on in the pandemic when all of the evidence from pre-COVID studies suggested that masks wouldn't work, and then show what happened afterwards, where Dr. Fauci here in the United States and many other agencies kind of flipped and started recommending masks in just a matter of days. One of the most important kind of revelations that I found from this book was to show that on March 31st, Dr. Fauci was sent an email from one of his employees showing that they had reviewed all of the best quality, high quality evidence on masking, and it showed no significant benefit. And then just 3 or 4 days later, Fauci and the CDC in the United States come out and recommend universal mask wearing. So the goal was to try to show, we had all this evidence to suggest it wouldn't work. With no new evidence, they flipped and their recommendations, and then here were the results afterwards, kind of proving that out, that they were right from the beginning. It wasn't really going to work.
Ian, what was the methodology by which you wrote your book?
Well, I just went and reviewed the data from a ton of different locations across all 50 U.S. states, the UK, many other international locations. Sweden, obviously, was a major example since hardly anybody there was wearing masks. And to point out, this data is all publicly accessible. It's from the World Health Organization or the New York Times and CDC here in the U.S. And show the effect is very consistent that there really is no significant positive benefit from mask wearing. People will put in mask mandates, and then a few weeks later, a few months later, the numbers skyrocket up and break records, and everybody goes through another surge. So that was kind of the idea. Just take the data from all these publicly accessible sources and plot it and show, put up these notations showing here's what we did this policy and what was the effect afterwards.
Now, of course, Ian, there are always challenges, aren't there, if you compare a country like Sweden with America or the UK, given the fact that perhaps the population are more compliant to unofficial advice rather than mandates. Perhaps public health is better in Sweden than it is in the UK or the US. But what is certainly more compelling is to compare US states, parts of the US within the same country that had different mask rules and similar outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can do that. And again, it's a very consistent effect. I did that a lot in the book to show, here's the two neighboring states that had wildly different policies. For example, California and Arizona in 2020 into 2021, with Arizona never had a statewide mask mandate. And the results as far as cases were nearly identical. And so that's to try to show, over and over again, it's the same pattern. You can look at neighboring states throughout the country and even neighboring counties within the country. Those are smaller jurisdictions, and the results are the same. There really is no impact. Different timing of mask mandates, when you implement it, and what the results are just a couple of weeks or a couple of months later. It's very consistent.
Have there been any definitive studies into mask mandates since the pandemic began? Have there been any properly peer-reviewed studies into masks since March 2020?
Well, the most famous would probably be the study in Denmark that was not as much about mask mandates, but it was about what would giving a mask to somebody, to instructing them how to use it. And they use surgical masks, not cloth masks. What would that do to result in decreasing infections among people that wore masks consistently? And the answer was that it made no difference at all. It was statistically insignificant. There was another study that looked at the county level in the United States. There are over 3,000 counties in the U.S. and compared all of them and looked at mandates, and there was no impact to having a mask mandate or even measuring compliance. They measure compliance as well. And there was no difference in terms of outcomes and case rates across the United States. And like you said, it's a great comparison because we have so many different jurisdictions, but in the same country. So everything that has been done been done well, and there's been some very flawed studies that our CDC has put out here, but everything that's been done well has kind of backed up the assertion that mask mandates really haven't mattered.
What about the argument, Ian, that masks are better than nothing, and if they saved just 1% of tragic COVID deaths, they would be worth it?
Well, there's obviously trade-offs to every policy, and masks are not a trade-off-free intervention. There are definitely societal harms to it. Here in the United States, we've had a ton of school masking that's become a very contentious debate where you have children as young as 2 years old being put into masks. That has significant impacts on their learning development and on their development as people. And, I don't think that, and it's also just increasing the state of fear, and that can have significant negative side effects as well. We've seen suicides and drug overdoses increase. And so I think that it's not just a simple calculus of how many infections or deaths did masks save, but what are the trade-offs that you are doing when you mandate masks and negative side effects. My personal view, and I think the evidence shows that they really haven't reduced 1% in really anywhere. So there is a trade-off, and the harms are there, and it hasn't really made, I don't think, any benefit whatsoever.
Well, I can quote one government scientific advisor early in the pandemic who, like Fauci and many others, said that we should not wear face coverings, that she actually, Jenny Harries, argued that they might be counterproductive because they could actually house the virus. They could be a storage device, and, you fiddle with the mask, it goes in your pocket, it comes back out again. It could be worse than no masks.
Yeah, so one of the things I bring up in the book was to talk briefly about this kind of misconception that doctors, surgeons wear masks to stop respiratory viruses, which is just not true. And there was an article from 2019 pointing out that they wear them in theory to stop bacteria and droplets from getting into an open wound during an operation. But in the review of evidence that the study did, they showed that there was contamination on the outside of the mask. So in theory, these surgeons were supposed to stop droplets, which are larger than aerosols, from getting into open wounds. But in practice, they were collecting those droplets on the outside of the mask. So as you say, using these improperly could actually make things worse in theory. I don't know if that's been proven or not, but it's definitely a significant possibility because they do collect this larger droplets, and that could potentially increase the rates of infection.
Certainly, a study several months ago published in the Spectator magazine here in the UK suggested that those Perspex screens that you see in shops and other outlets have the potential to trap aerosols and are arguably counterproductive, although it seems we're still having to deal with them, and you see them in shops and elsewhere. So if there isn't a strong, compelling scientific case for masks, why do we have them?
I think it's a combination of the kind of precautionary principle kind of run amok, where a lot of politicians and experts early on, I think, saw the success, or what they thought was the success, of Asian countries in combating COVID, and they contributed to mask wearing. Obviously, it's a different culture and things like that. So I think they kind of just assumed, well, we should try it because we don't know what else to do. And they kind of threw out all of their established principles of public health and how to deal with pandemics and all their guidance. And I think it really kind of became a lot of a sunk cost fallacy as well, where, the promotion efforts were so dramatic. And here you had politicians and experts going out and saying, wearing a mask is the most important thing you can do. It's kind. I mean, they've all these campaigns and advertising and signs everywhere. And so once you kind of devoted yourself to this method that might work, even though as the results are accumulating that it's not working, it's really hard to back out of that and say and tell the people, actually, we thought this might work and it didn't. That's not a very politically beneficial thing to do, I think. So it became a lot of this. It might have an effect. As it didn't, it was a sunk cost, and then it became politically difficult to get out of it.
Ian Miller, let's bring in my panel, if you'll forgive me. Josh Howie, Alice Grant and Chloe Dobbs. Chloe, what's your view about face coverings? You are a student, and students, of course, have had to try to learn whilst wearing face coverings in lecture halls and, of course, younger kids at school.
Yeah, I think I agree with Ian that they were brought in on the basis of let's just try this because we don't know what else to do. And then it's kind of stuck and become this virtue signalling kind of thing. Forgive me for being a bit of a greenie, but one of my main arguments against masks is we know cloth masks do absolutely bugger all. Medical grade masks might do something, but if they do, I think the fact that they take 450 years to decompose and are just filling the world with pollution really outweighs the benefit of having them.
Well, of course, that's another argument that hasn't been made in relation to the downsides of face coverings, Ian, and that's the environmental damage.
Yeah, absolutely. You see them all over the place, littering streets, in oceans and in landfills. And there's been a lot of photos of animal and wildlife with piles of masks around them. And yeah, it's really devastating to see that. I think, we've really ignored the consequences of this because in large part they were more concerned with just getting everybody to wear a mask, and more so than they were of even discussing trade-offs and potential harms to it.
Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Because in the UK, we've predominantly worn surgical masks and cloth masks. They're not accepted in Austria or Germany. They require the slightly more professional N95 masks. So is there a hierarchy of masks? And do those rather stronger masks have some effect?
Well, in theory, N95s would have the most potential benefit. In practice, they have to be fit tested, meaning that everybody has a different face shape, so you have to measure it to be properly fitted to that individual face. If you have facial hair, it's going to be very difficult to get a proper fit. In practice and in reality, what we're seeing is that obviously Austria and Germany have broken records where their cases have skyrocketed out of control long after N95 mask mandates were put in place. And you can compare different states in Germany that had a lower grade surgical mask versus a N95 mask mandate. And the results have actually been better in the surgical grade mask mandate county or states. So yeah, in reality, it's just been no significant impact, which is, again, it's not surprising because in order for those to work properly, they'd have to be fit tested to a level that's just not being done in the general public.
Josh Howie, it would be a crime at the best of times to cover your handsome face. But what's your view on this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with... Ian's probably also biased in that way as well. It makes me a bit angry listening to Ian. If only I had some scissors and a surgical mask, then I'm sure I could have a clip that would go viral.
You'd never want to do a gimmick like that. That would be so cheap.
So cheap. But it would get, your own TV show. So, but I think as we've sort of danced around this a little bit, it was an illusion of control. That's really what it came down to. Because remember, 2 years ago, there wasn't a vaccine. Everybody was terrified. And I think that really that's one of the things. Yes, there was very little evidence, or even evidence proving the opposite. But I think what people were scared, and this gave the idea that actually you could do something. And it went too far. And then at that point, people were so trapped by that narrative that if you were to then question it, suddenly you're not a good human being anymore. Suddenly you're a crank.
Alice, what do you think about this?
Yeah, proud crank. I do think there's something quite insidious about forcing the population to be masked when it does kind of, from a behavioural psychology point of view, does create, atomised citizens, individuals who are basically unable to communicate with others. So from a psychological point, I think the damage has been done, very much to our society and especially to young children. I remember the double masking phase, like some of the trends became really absurd. And of course, I almost wish they did actually work considering the amount of masks that are piled up in rubbish. And of course, we all bought them from China as well. So it just seems like a really awful government policy. And yeah.
Ian, if you were somebody that was unlucky enough to have comorbidities, I've got viewers to this programme who are very vulnerable, especially as they go into busy areas like the supermarket or perhaps public transport. And they feel reassured by face coverings, both them wearing one and having others wearing them around them. And you look at evidence from, for example, the CDC in America, who have said multi-layer cloth masks block the release of exhaled respiratory particles into the environment, along with any microorganisms associated with these particles. If you were somebody that was in the vulnerable group, you would rightly feel safer around people wearing a mask than not.
Absolutely, but that doesn't mean that it's true. And one of the things that is you can kind of compare that to is, say, driving a car versus getting into an airplane. Airplanes are statistically much safer than cars, but people get into a car, they don't think to themselves, I'm going to have an accident right now. It's just kind of a perception rather than reality. And the thing about blocking droplets was that, the UK's Health Services Agency back in 2011 had done a study and reported the results of a study showing that masks did not prevent the transmission or blockage of aerosols. Now everybody kind of acknowledges aerosols are the main driver of transmission with COVID. So the kind of rationale of blocking a droplet with a mask, in theory, could make sense, but in reality, that's just not how COVID is being transmitted. So they might feel safer, but unfortunately, it's just not actually providing any protection, and it's not providing source control from people that have potentially COVID in a supermarket.
One issue, Ian, before we go, is that masks have become political, haven't they? And we didn't see that one coming.
It definitely has, especially here in the United States. It's definitely been a huge political issue. And
it's like a badge, isn't it, Ian? It's like a badge now. You're literally telling the world
really
what your politics are.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a very dangerous attitude, because that can't be a reason to justify mandating it in areas that have a dominant political ideology that believes in masks as being a badge. You have to base things off evidence and data, and the evidence and data has accumulated that it hasn't really made a difference. If people want to make themselves feel better, they can do that, but it's just not actually providing any significant protection, which is exactly what all the science said, pre-COVID. So hopefully, as we get further removed from the severe pandemic stage of this, that people start to kind of accept that, and we'll get to see more acknowledgement of that in a lot of media outlets and in scientific journals, and we'll kind of move away from that ideology.
Ian, how do you see it playing out with mask mandates in the months and years to come in countries like the UK and America? Will they be with us forever? Is it now a mechanism that will be leveraged by governments every winter?
My concern is that we will see some element to that. I think that now that they've tried to say that masks prevent the spread of respiratory viruses, how do you ever kind of put that genie back in the bottle now that it's out there now? So if you're saying that masks work to prevent infections and save lives, how can you ever essentially sentence people to getting a respiratory virus or to dying in the winter by not mandating masks? I hope that there is enough awareness among politicians that these are very unpopular policies and restrictions in the long term, And then also, and my rationale and the goal with the book was try to kind of destroy these entire arguments and the assumptions that masks work, because if you do buy that premise, you could see these mandates come back every winter, for example. So hopefully that's not the case. My concern is that it might be, but I do believe that we'll see some move towards ending these permanently.
Ian, Unmasked is a fascinating read. I'm halfway through it. It's a real page-turner. And as I said at the beginning, you've read the data and crunched the numbers so we don't have to. Unmasked is out now. It's already a bestseller. It's winning rave reviews. It's by Ian Miller. Ian, thanks so much, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Brilliant stuff. Well, I've been asking for your reaction on Twitter. What do you think? Will we have face masks forever? Should we have face masks forever? Well, to that latter question, the answer is no, according to most of you. 92.2% say we should not have face masks forever. 7.8% say yes. Well, it's all about opinions on my show, so get yours over to me via email, mark@gbnews.uk. Really excited about my Mark Meets guest tonight. Legendary Mail on Sunday columnist Peter Hitchens is live at 10. So you get your questions in now, mark@gbnews.uk. And don't forget, just after the headlines with Bethany at 10, we've got my alternative news headlines. You won't want to miss those. Public figures, watch your back, because I'm headed in your direction. Next in the news agenda, we'll ask, should prisoners be living in luxury prisons? Some are describing them as better than Butlins. We'll react to that shortly. I'll see you in 2.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask. So why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You are watching Tonight Live with me, Mark Dolan. Delighted to have with me my panellists of Josh Howie, Alice Grant and Chloe Dobbs. So many stories to get through, plus your emails in 2 minutes' time. But let's react to some of the big stories of the day alongside Alice, Chloe and Josh. And let's kick off with this one. HMP 5 Wells, which sounds like a pub, doesn't it? But it's a prison that has just opened in Northamptonshire. It's been described as being better than Butlins, with light and airy rooms and landscaped gardens. And, would you believe it, there are no bars on the windows. Is it the world's first woke prison? It's certainly an open prison, isn't it? So let's get reaction from my panel on that one. What do you think, Alice? Luxury prison, is that the way to go for people that have, murdered, burgled, mugged people?
No, not at all. I think it kind of defeats the whole point of the punitive justice system. It might even provide an incentive for crime, which would be worst case scenario. So absolutely not, I'd say. very dodgy. Very
What do you
liberal.
think prison should be like? Describe, in your view, what the perfect prison would be.
Well,
bearing in mind, by the way, that GB
Perfect
News
prison.
is watched in prisons. It's lovely to have your company. Can I just say hi to Big Jim? I miss you.
Well, if it's funded by the taxpayer, then certainly stripped down, minimal cell, you know.
You want to strip them down? I think that's inappropriate.
But of course, I mean, monks live in cells. I think people who've committed crimes should definitely be living in...
Funnily enough, I mean, I definitely think the idea that cellmates have got, you know, phones and you know, possibly other luxury items. I mean, it was a story we covered in the well, that's just too luxury. That's too good for most people. But what I do think is, I think that they should have educational resources. I think there should be workshops with which they can have tools for once they leave prison. And also, I do actually believe they should have correct nutrition as well, because there's this idea that they should just eat mashed potatoes for 10 years. And I think, actually, the physical and mental health is something that's important, but that's different from luxury, isn't it?
Yes, no, absolutely. There's obviously some things, a necessity, as you said, nutrition, and also any schemes for rehabilitation into society, preferably, or access to a chaplain or something, or counsellor. But of course, you know, these luxury prisons that we've heard so much about in countries like Sweden and Denmark as well are a bit of a failed experiment, you know, with sofas and TVs. And it just, I mean, I can't imagine being someone who's been wronged, and to know that the criminal who wronged you is leading quite a relatively comfortable life in a prison.
Yeah,
I mean,
sofas, TVs. What is it, a prison or an advertising agency?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I personally think it should be like Demolition Man. And sort of this
Sylvester
probably
Stallone?
showing my age now to our...
That's a Stallone classic,
Stallone,
isn't it?
where it just freeze the people for like 2 decades. Yeah, I mean, we'll see, put the resources into that. But as you said, education, number one, and emotional investment, teaching people how to deal with, you know, having therapists. And that has been proven, you know, a lot of people who are going into prison are going in from very damaged backgrounds, whether it's physical abuse, violence or sexual, and teaching people how to cope with these things, and then giving them the tools by which they can make their lives better coming out, make the alternative better than going back to crime, and also how to emotionally deal with anger and frustration, and that's what's needed.
We've got to get it right with prisons, Chloe, haven't we? Because if we do, it makes the streets of Britain safer.
Exactly. And now I'm going to be a bit of a softie and say being in prison shouldn't be miserable. Because, as Josh has pointed out, the mental health of the people in prison is really important, and you've got a place there where you've got some people with the worst mental health in the country who really need help. And those people, although some people are going to be there for life, a lot of those are going to come out, and we don't want them to reoffend, and we want them to have another chance. And so when we're putting money into prisons, we should be putting money into things which is going to improve their mental health, improve their motivation, give them skills so that they have a second chance when they come out of there. So prison shouldn't be miserable, but the money should be spent in the right places, not, say, on hair colours in the bathrooms.
Yeah, well, let's have a look at Declan's email. He says, "Dear Mark, prisons should be for victims of crime so they can have a break from reality." And I think that's a really fair point. He says, "GB News could live stream this new prison." That's not a bad shout, is it? Definitely. Why not? We're open to ideas. With lots of emails coming in on this as well. Bob says prisons are for punishment and nothing else. Get real. Thank you very much for that, Bob. Well, look, let's move on to our next story, and it concerns the footballer Kurt Zouma, who has not been suspended by his club, West Ham, despite being filmed kicking and slapping a cat. Zouma has been fined £250,000, which is, quite amazingly, 2 weeks' wages. But he played for West Ham on Tuesday, and the manager, David Moyes, has confirmed he could well play again on Sunday. So what do we think about this? Footy fans in the panel? Alice?
Cat fan. I have
You're
3
a cat
cats
fan.
myself.
You got 3?
3, yeah.
Can I just say that's greedy?
Never enough. Never enough.
I know what you mean.
Like,
How did you come to acquire 3? How did that wouldn't have been by design, I can't imagine.
No, one of them gave birth, and we kept 1 cat.
So you got a
really
randy
hard
cat.
already. Yeah, she was neutered after 2 pregnancies because it was getting a bit out of hand.
We did that with Mrs. Dolan, I'll tell you.
But yeah, no, it was horrifying, that video.
Yes, it was.
Especially, I know, I couldn't believe it. I thought it was really awful. And yeah.
I mean, back to punishment and prisons,
Yes.
but what is the right way to approach this? I mean, credit to the RSPCA, because they've actually issued a statement saying that they are investigating this. there was an outcry about why they didn't react more quickly. Well, they said, no, we're aware of this and we have been, and we will sort of essentially consider charges. So that's happening. That's a process. But
I think
what about his professional career and whether he gets to be a footballer, whether he plays for West Ham? What's the right way to handle this?
Well, I think the biggest damage that has been done is ultimately to his reputation. I don't see why this should directly affect his job, but I think animal abuse is obviously extremely serious. And I think one positive thing about the internet is that a lot of it has sometimes come to light. I remember not too long ago, who's that QC who battered a fox?
Yes, Jolyon Morm, yeah.
Yes, yeah, that was shocking. And
in a kimono, I think, on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
He was very proud of it.
Imagine having an outfit
insane.
for your...
boasting about it on Twitter afterwards. I mean, just crazy. So, yeah.
So look, what do you think about this, Chloe? Because I think that the obvious step for West Ham is simply to put this guy on the bench for a few weeks, let him sit it out, let him reflect on his behaviour, not play him in the next available match.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's one question to ask, which is, you know, what is football about at this point? Is football a business, or is it about being fair, making sure the best players get the best football careers? Now, for the business, it's not looking good in that sponsors are dropping out for West Ham and for him as an individual. But as you said, if he sits out for a few weeks, this might just blow over. In terms of fairness, his teammate has commented that other people who have been convicted of racial crimes have been able to play on, but no high-profile footballers have been convicted. Those who were accused but not found guilty still receive severe punishments. Like John Terry received £220,000 fine, was removed as England's captain, for example.
There you go. Well, look, lots of thoughts coming in on email to that story as well. And don't forget, my Mark Meets guest at 10 is Peter Hitchens. So excited about that. Get your questions in now. mark@gbnews.uk. Also, we've got my alternative news headlines and more from my fantastic panel and another great British game show. See you after the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGiven. Dry for much of the time in the southeast during the next 24 hours, but turning wetter and windier elsewhere. However, as that wet and windy weather arrives, it brings with it milder air. Cold air is ahead of these weather fronts as they push into parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland during the evening. And as a result, well, on the forward band of the rain, there'll be some snow for a time above 300 or 400 metres across Scotland and northern England, but it doesn't last. The winds pick up from the southwest, coastal gales for western Scotland, and milder air pushing in. So eventually most of this stuff is rain. It pushes into northern England, West Wales by the end of the night. Drier ahead of it, a touch of frost possible in East Anglia, the southeast, but eventually temperatures lift through the night as the winds pick up. It's a bright start for parts of the Midlands, East Anglia, southern England first thing, and skies brighten through the morning for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Blustery showers push in here, but also some sunny spells. It's in between where we've got some heavy and persistent rain. Northern England, eventually the Midlands, Wales, and then by the end of the day, Cornwall as well as Devon. Temperatures aren't up to much either, 8, 9, 10 Celsius, but not feeling very pleasant where we've got the wind and the rain. Now into Saturday night, the rain tends to sink south. By this stage, it's lighter and patchier, but during the early hours of Sunday, the next batch of wet and windy weather starts to arrive into southwest England as well as Wales. Drier to the east and to the north, some clear spells for central and northern Scotland, a few showers here. But Sunday, really, for the vast majority, soon turns wet and windy. From the west, bands of rain and wind sweep through, coastal gales for the south coast of England, and the most heavy and persistent rain affecting Wales. And really through the course of Saturday and Sunday, because of the accumulated rain, we could see some issues here. Monday is also very changeable, with spells of rain or showers moving south, likewise on Tuesday.
We've got a big Saturday for you on GB News. From 6 a.m, it's breakfast with Stephen and Anne. At 10, join Esther and Philip for the Saturday selection. Alistair, Darren and Nana take you through the day. And don't miss Neil Oliver Live at 7 p.m. At 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight, followed by Headliners. That's Saturday on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So many emails coming in. I've got to remedy that in the next hour of the show. Thank you so much for getting in touch. How about this, though, from William, who says, "Hi, Mark. If you're poor and can't pay your rent and need a food bank, why not have a luxury prison sentence?" Tracy says, "Mark, the prisoners should be out working, picking fruit or veg. We cannot get workers to do those jobs anyway. We're too soft." Thank you very much to Tracy for that one. Look, lots more to come. How about this quickly? Jim says, "Mark, what are prisons really for? Perhaps prisons should be reserved for people that simply can't be let loose in the general population. After all, why do we want to pay for people who could pay their own way and pay tax to become more degenerates? We could become more inventive in finding ways to make people pay for their crimes, or perhaps provide a deterrent to offend. Do we really want to imprison people that can't pay their TV licence?" Well, Jim, thank you for that thoughtful response. We'll get to more of your opinions very shortly. Don't forget, my big opinion is now on the Twitter feed. So if you missed it, it's all about lockdowns and the cheerleaders for lockdowns. And you'll find that at GB News on Twitter, plus a few words about Adele. So don't miss that. And also, in a couple of minutes' time, my Mark Meets guest is the brilliant, the amazing Peter Hitchens, Mail on Sunday columnist. And don't forget, on the other side of this, my alternative news headlines. First up, here are the headlines, the real headlines, with Bethany.
Thanks, Mark. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. The Foreign Office is urging British nationals to leave Ukraine while commercial means are still available. Speaking in Moscow earlier, the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace warned Russia could invade Ukraine at any time. Russia has repeatedly denied plans to invade its neighbour, despite placing more than 100,000 troops at the border. Ben Wallace said he hopes there's a way forward after today's talks.
I was clear about the tragic consequences that any invasion of Ukraine could have. We listened to the assurances given by Minister Shoigu and indeed General Gerasimov that they would not invade Ukraine. And we urged dialogue as a way through to address any concerns that the Russian government may have.
President Joe Biden is also urging US nationals to leave Ukraine. It comes as America's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, is warning that Russia is prepared to launch an attack within the next week.
We are in the window when an invasion could begin at any time, should Vladimir Putin decide to order it. I will not comment on the details of our intelligence information, but I do want to be clear. It could begin during the Olympics, despite a lot of speculation that it would only happen after the Olympics.
Some news just in. The Prime Minister has received a questionnaire from the Metropolitan Police. A Number 10 spokesperson says Boris Johnson will respond as required. This is part of the Met's investigation into a number of alleged parties held in Downing Street while COVID restrictions were in place. The Home Secretary says the next Met Police Commissioner, who will replace Dame Cressida Dick, faces stark challenges. Priti Patel says the culture at the force and the behaviour of its officers needs an overhaul by a new leader. GB News' Home and Security editor Mark White has this update.
Here at the Home Office, Priti Patel has confirmed that she has now begun the process to find a new Metropolitan Police Commissioner. Any replacement for Cressida Dick, she says, would have to show strong and decisive leadership to deal with the institutional issues that have plagued the Metropolitan Police in recent years. It is also the most political of policing roles, having to straddle the competing demands of a Labour London mayor and a Conservative Home Secretary.
The UK economy grew by a record 7.5% in 2021, following a large fall the year prior due to the pandemic. Official figures show GDP grew by 1% in the final quarter last year, despite the impact of the Omicron variant in December. Spain has dropped its travel entry requirement for British children over the age of 12 to be fully vaccinated. They will only have to show proof of a recent negative COVID test, and fully vaccinated passengers don't need to take a test when arriving back in the UK. On TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Dolan tonight.
Lots to get through in this hour, including my amazing Mark Meets guest, the legendary journalist, author and broadcaster Peter Hitchens. It's time now for my alternative news headlines. Cadbury's are bringing out new packaging for their chocolate bars, encouraging customers to eat less of their product and in more than one sitting. The new packaging means you'll be able to close the bar and have the rest a bit later. It's thought this healthy approach may catch on in other areas, with drinkers being told not to finish the whole of their pint and MPs in Parliament being told to have just half of a line of cocaine and save the rest for when they go to a dinner party in Islington. Russian President Vladimir Putin and French President Emmanuel Macron had a high-level meeting this week to discuss the crisis in Ukraine. Here they are, seated at the world's largest table, clearly nicked from the set of Downton Abbey. It was a very tense affair, with Vladimir Putin said to be uncomfortable negotiating with a power-crazed dictator that won't see reason. There's trouble in paradise, folks. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are complaining of bad smells in their neighbourhood of Montecito in California. It seems the whole area is filled with a horrific stench every time they open a window, go for a walk, or play a recording of their interview with Oprah Winfrey. Ben & Jerry's, the ice cream company, have been telling Joe Biden what to do in relation to Ukraine, urging that tensions are de-escalated. That's right, Ben & Jerry's with a view on foreign affairs. In a further welcome intervention from big business, Ronald McDonald has advised the government to cut interest rates. And Tony the Tiger from Frosties says it's time for a grown-up conversation about the spiralling cost of HS2. He says they're not great. And those are your alternative news headlines. They're great. There you go. I've been practicing that all afternoon. It's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of sport, showbiz, business, academia and beyond, as well as those who simply have a big story to tell. Tonight, one of the most experienced and best-known journalists in the country. Never afraid to go against the grain of public opinion or challenge the status quo, Peter Hitchens remains one of the most compelling journalistic voices in the country. Peter, of course, writes an unmissable column for the Mail on Sunday and is a former correspondent in Moscow and Washington. He has contributed to The Spectator, The American Conservative, The Guardian, First Things, Prospect, and The New Statesman. Hitchens has published numerous best-selling books, including The Abolition of Britain, The Rage Against God, The War We Never Fought, and The Phony Victory. Previously, a bit of a lefty and a supporter of the Labour Party, Peter became more conservative during the 90s. It now seems he doesn't rate any of them. So you might agree with this man, you might disagree. But there's always a debate to be had, and it's never dull. I'm delighted to say that Peter Hitchens joins me now. Hi, Peter.
Good evening.
Peter, were you really a lefty in the 70s?
Well, what do you mean, was I really? Would I say I had been if I hadn't been? Yes, I was.
Well, I don't trust Wikipedia. I trust your column. I trust the Mail on Sunday, but not the internet.
You shouldn't trust Wikipedia, especially about me, since I'm banned from Wikipedia. And I'm not, I can't even correct major mistakes in the entry about me or things there which I believe to be inaccurate. And I'm banned from Wikipedia because I was actually trying to rescue the reputation of somebody who had been besmirched. And in the course of doing so, I came up against one of those people who calls himself a Wikipedia editor. And I was slightly flippant in my dealings with him, whereupon large numbers of people descended from on high and said that I must apologize. And when I said I had nothing to apologize for, they banned me from Wikipedia. So I can't, it's completely totalitarian state. I can't go near it anymore. They can say what they like about me, and I can do nothing about it.
Yes, I mean, that's very concerning. Peter, is that an early example of tech censorship?
Well, it's not that early. I mean, it was. It happened about, I suppose, 3 years ago now. But it certainly is an indication. Anybody who's had any dealings with Wikipedia will know that it has these mysterious guardians who descend if any attempt is made to alter certain sites. It's very difficult to actually insert any balance into a lot of what it does. But I had not previously realized that it could be so ruthless in simply banning effectively for life anybody who doesn't immediately do what they're told by this collection of imperial wizards.
It is very concerning. What are your thoughts about the issue of tech censorship in the course of the pandemic? People, for example, speculating about the origins of the virus, who might have seen their accounts suspended or cancelled early in the pandemic and now vindicated that COVID most likely came from a lab in Wuhan.
Well, I don't know anything about the origins of COVID and wouldn't want to get involved in that, but certainly I had some experiences during the wilder periods of the panic, when it certainly appeared that attempts were being made to reduce my ability to communicate with people, especially via YouTube. And there's no doubt that the nature of the internet as it is and its domination by several extremely large, effective monopolies means that point of view, which they've pretty much embraced, is enormously powerful. And if you don't accept it, then you can, even without your knowledge, be sidelined so people can't find what you've said. The most frightening aspect of this is not the direct censorship, though that is, to me, repulsive. And it is censorship because it has exactly the same effect as a state censor sitting in the office of a newspaper saying you can't print that. It means people can't hear or see what people have said because somebody doesn't like it. But that censorship is bad, but in some ways worse is the thing called shadow banning, where you and others who are trying to find you are completely unaware of the fact that algorithms are at work, which are making it harder for them to find what you say. If people want to argue with me, say that I'm wrong, then of course I welcome the challenge, and I am wrong from time to time, as every human being is. And if so, I try to correct it and apologize for the error. But to be pushed into inaccessibility by an unseen algorithm is really quite creepy, and I find it very worrying. The whole experience of the past 2 years has been an education for me, and I had feared for a long time that something of this sort was coming, an education in practice of quite a serious change in our society going on.
Peter, you've been a prominent critic of many of the COVID measures that we've seen over the last 2 years. At what point in the pandemic did you smell a rat?
Well, I from the very beginning, I felt that there was a severe overreaction. I think that the overreaction is in some ways summed up by the use of the term pandemic, an inexact expression. There obviously was a serious outbreak of a serious disease.
Sure.
And I say that partly because it's essential to make it clear to people that I've never denied the disease existed, never suggested it isn't serious, never said that it doesn't make people very ill and on occasion kill them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the measures which were adopted to counter it were rational or indeed effective. And I thought from pretty much the beginning, I think I can take back to the middle of March of 2019, I thought from the very beginning that there was an overreaction taking place and that the modelling being put forward was suspect, not least because some of the people involved in it had been involved in modelling before, which had not turned out to be accurate. I just think I was astonished when I raised these doubts that I was more or less entirely on my own in the first few days. After a while, various other people did pick up. But to begin with, I was astonished that the whole of British journalism, the whole of British politics seemed to have believed this thing without question from the start. Well, that's not our job. The basic motto of journalism is Otto von Bismarck's great saying, never believe anything until it's been officially denied. And the job of the opposition is to oppose. And there's a simple ABC, isn't there? Assume nothing, believe nobody, and check everything. And those rules were simply not being followed, I think, by most people in my trade in the early days and weeks of the Great Panic, as I call it.
And what do you think will be the legacy of these COVID measures? Will there be a point at which we leave all of this behind? Or do you think, Peter, the country is irrevocably changed?
Well, the problem with convulsions of this scale is that they're quite like wars. They do utterly change society, and it's quite plain. One of the things you see still long after the actual requirement for it has gone. And in fact, in some cases, when there never has been a requirement for it, large numbers of people still going around with their faces covered. And these people have plainly been, I think, quite badly frightened by what, in my view, was in many cases fear propaganda, and they remain frightened, and they've had their behaviour unalterably changed. I know of businesses, particularly small ones, which have just disappeared. I think that every single part of the economy has been pretty much damaged during this. You don't come back from it, and I think there has been a social revolution and a centralisation of power. And also the government has learned that it can get away with arrogating powers to itself, which it ought never to have had and should be taken away from it. But no one will take it away. So I think, yes, things have been irrevocably altered. But the other thing which is irrevocable is the gigantic damage done to the economy, which I predicted ages ago that this would lead to severe inflation, which numbers of people poo-pooed, and it has, of course, led to severe inflation. I predicted it would lead to higher taxation, and it has done so. And I think that could go higher, and I think it will probably also lead to a fair degree of long-term unemployment as well. This is what happens when you squander huge quantities of money that you don't have, which is what the government's policy was. The legacy will be huge, and of course, we all know now, I think, a point that was being made by skeptics from the start, that the operation of the National Health Service, which we were supposed to be protecting, has been hugely obstructed by this. And large numbers of people are now suffering and will now suffer from waits for operations and treatment, which could be very damaging. The thing is tragic. And I summed it up from the start as the whole thing being like a man who burns down his house to get rid of a wasp's nest. And I believe that if ever we do reach a sort of high point where we can look back on this in calm and rationality, that is what most people will conclude. But it may be a long time before they can see that.
Peter, do you think that these measures have accelerated the rise of China?
I don't think particularly. I think the rise of China was already well underway. I think the fascinating thing about it is the way in which we in free countries with traditions of limited government have adopted Chinese methods of government. And this was the method adopted, quarantining the healthy and mass house arrest and preventing people from moving and generally giving the government enormous powers over our daily lives, was the Chinese method, we had in this country an elaborate and carefully worked out plan prepared by experienced and knowledgeable people to deal with such an outbreak, and it was chucked in the bin and replaced by something which could have been devised in Peking, and that's much more alarming to me than the rise of China as a power, which I think was already well underway. I spent a lot of the past 20 years actually visiting China and looking at it, and came back from each visit more and more terrified by the rise of this power. But that's not really a COVID issue. That's a general issue that the world is going to have to confront sooner or later.
Now, Peter, you've never been a tribal journalist, and you've never sat with one particular fixed political opinion, but you clearly had a remarkable career in journalism. I think because you weren't able to get into the Royal Navy, is that right? You were hoping to be a naval officer.
Well, I was hoping to be a naval officer. My father was a naval officer, and I thought it was an immensely agreeable and enjoyable thing to do. Luckily for me, I have a slight eye defect, which back in the 1950s and 60s, when it was discovered, was completely ruled me out. Which is very fortunate, because had I actually become what I wanted to be, which was a destroyer captain, I would be out of a job now, because the Navy doesn't have more than about 6 destroyers, and I think 3 of them are tied up permanently because they can't get them to move. So very fortunately, I went into journalism instead.
And how did you?
Luck. They don't look like luck at the time, they turn out to be.
What led you to journalism in particular, Peter? Did you want to change the world?
I liked it. It's the perfect job for someone who is, how should I put it, mildly irresponsible, doesn't seek power over other people, and I have a moderate talent for discovery and a reasonable gift for scribbling, and it's been years of more or less harmless fun. I did at school, and indeed at home, I used to do the childish school newspapers and a newspaper at home and stuff like that, which I always enjoyed doing. I read newspapers with enthusiasm from quite an early age, and liked what I saw. I'm not exactly sure what eventually brought me to it, though I think the reason why I chose journalism when I actually left university was because I was then a revolutionary socialist, and I believed that what I should do was infiltrate Fleet Street and work there on behalf of the revolution. And you can see how that worked out.
Why did your politics change, Peter? I think you campaigned for Ken Livingstone at one point.
I campaigned for Ken Livingstone because I was a member of the Hampstead Labour Party at the time, and he was our chosen candidate. I campaigned for him partly because I knew he would lose. He had absolutely no chance of winning. Partly because I knew him a bit, and I've always found him, if absurd, likable, and partly because if I was going to stay in the Labour Party, which I thought that I might at the time, it's always good to support the party. As I say, I never thought he would win, and he didn't. This is, as I say, when he was standing for Parliament in 1979. But at the time, I was pretty much teetering on the edge of the Hampstead Labour Party. I used to get called to order during my speeches at meetings for being heckled. Comrade Hitchens, the chairman, would say, can you stop provoking the other comrades, rather than telling them to stop heckling me, which was her proper duty.
So why this shift to the right in the 90s, Peter?
Well, I didn't shift to the right in the 90s. I've been shifting to the right since the 1970s. I left the grouplet to which I belonged, then called the International Socialists, which later went completely round the bend and called itself the Socialist Workers' Party. I mean, when I was in it back in the early 70s, late 60s, we were never so crazy as to think 3,000 students were a political party. But people get these delusions. I left it in 75. I actually wrote a letter of resignation, which I used to hope MI5 had kept, but I now gather they've destroyed the records. And I just decided it didn't work for me anymore. It was plain from having spent 2 years then on a local newspaper and encountered life as it was actually lived, that the ideas which had seemed reasonable during 3 years in a concrete and glass university campus simply weren't workable or even right for the society in which I actually lived, so I gave them up.
And what do you make of our current political system? Do you think that the Conservatives will win the next election? And do you think we will have a two-party system of politics for the foreseeable future?
Well, I'm not a mystic prophet. I think the system itself is good in all ways except one, and that is that the system of first past the post is excellent because it allows the people to throw out a government they don't want overnight, which is almost impossible in any other European country. And it creates two, or should create two, adversarial parties, which are always fighting each other, and therefore there's never a total domination of politics by one set of ideas. The problem with this is that's broken down. Both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party are dead parties. If either of them went out into the street and held a flag day and tried to get people to give them money, no one would give them anything because nobody likes them. But they're kept alive by dodgy billionaires and by trade unions and also by the state funding, which opposition parties get in quite large quantities now. People don't realise how much this is. And by broadcasting rules, which reserve for them an enormous amount of coverage on the basis of their past performance. So it's much harder than it ought to be for those parties to collapse, which they ought to, and for new parties to make their way in. Anyone can confound something which they call a new party, but unless it actually destroys and removes from its position either the Labour or the Conservative Party, nothing will happen. The other thing is that David Cameron was responsible for this, and I really did try to fight very hard against it when it happened. But in 2010, the Conservative Party under David Cameron pretty much stood for election on a new Labour platform. So instead of having two adversarial parties grappling with each other in Parliament, as it should be, we have since 2010 more or less had two identical parties, which have got no real conflict between them. So the adversarial system has died. So there are things that could be done to reform our system, but I don't think anyone will do them. And the real problem lying ahead is that I think that Sir Keir Starmer can become Prime Minister at the next election, but almost certainly only with the support of Scottish National Party MPs, in which case an extraordinarily nasty bargain seems to me to be likely, in which he grants Nicola Sturgeon a new referendum on Scottish independence, and in return he gets her support for major constitutional change south of the border, including, I would suspect strongly, some form of proportional representation, which would end the two-party system as we know.
Yeah, and that's, of course, when Labour concede that they can't win an overall majority, and I suspect they can't, Peter. Briefly, if you can, a couple of other final questions. Do you think Boris Johnson leads the Tories into the next election? What's your appraisal of Boris? You were, for example, a keen Brexiteer, so he's delivered on that front.
Wait a minute, I wasn't a keen Brexiteer. That's a complete fantasy.
Well, you're very critical of the EU, and you suggested that, that there should be a party that stands for a departure from the EU.
Yes.
I think you said we don't need a referendum.
No, but you must understand, what I wanted was for this country to leave the European Union. I hate the very term Brexit. I didn't like the look of the people who were campaigning for it. What I wanted was for this country to regain its independence and its constitution and preserve its unique legal system above all things. I didn't want it to become an offshore Singapore off the northwest coast of Europe. I'm not, in fact, a free trader. I'm a protectionist. And I wanted us to remain within the single market and, if possible, within the customs union. It's the politics that concerned me, and all my concerns were swept aside by the campaign which eventually won the referendum. I took no part in the referendum. I didn't vote in the referendum. So I absolutely reject the suggestion that I was a keen Brexiteer. As for Mr. Johnson, I don't know why you call him Boris. His name is Alexander, and Boris is a stage name, which really journalists should not use if they want to be independent. It's there to make him look cuddly and friendly, which he's not particularly. You should either call him Mr. Johnson, or you should use the actual name which he uses among his friends and family, which is Al or Alexander. He's a perfectly pleasant person to meet. I've had some extremely agreeable dealings with him. I've no idea whether he'll stay as Prime Minister. I don't much care, because I think this method of politics by human sacrifice, which we've developed in this country, is really stupid. You spend all your effort getting rid of a person, but you change absolutely nothing about the policies that person was pushing through.
Final thought, and I think it brings our conversation full circle, Peter, and it's about journalism. The Mail on Sunday, your paper, is a fantastic paper, of course, but with the business model of newspapers under increasing sort of challenge, do you worry for the future of journalism in this country and around the world?
Well, the future of journalism is obviously tending towards the electronic and away from print. But I think print continues to survive, particularly in the shape of my newspaper and its stablemate, the Daily Mail, because we are by far the best at what we do. And I think it's got a lot of life left in it. But ultimately, obviously, any journalist who looks at what's going on must recognise that, as indeed Associated Newspapers have with its Mail Online operation, that an awful lot of the future is going to be electronic, and you have to be involved in it, you have to take part in it. I do, and I do social media and I do broadcasting, but I don't think that print journalism is dead yet by any manner of means. It may be like hand-loom weaving in that it might eventually be swept aside by more mass production methods, but it's a good deal better than the mass production methods, and I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people continue to buy the papers.
If you want to know what Peter Hitchens thinks, don't go to Wikipedia. Read his brilliant column in the Mail on Sunday this Sunday. Peter, a privilege to have you on the show. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
There you go, Peter Hitchens. Fascinating conversation. Lots more to come in the programme. Before 11, another Great British Game Show. And in our news agenda, on the day that CBBC are celebrating their 20th anniversary, we'll be asking, is modern-day children's TV any good? Lots more stories to get through. And don't forget, tomorrow's papers after 11 in Headliners. See you shortly.
We've got a big Saturday for you on GB News. From 6 a.m, it's Breakfast with Stephen and Anne. At 10, join Esther and Philip for the Saturday selection. Alistair, Darren and Nana take you through the day. And don't miss Neil Oliver Live at 7 p.m. At 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight, followed by Headliners. That's Saturday on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So many great emails coming in response to my conversation with the Mail on Sunday columnist Peter Hitchens. What a legend, says Sandra. A fascinating guy, and he's so often right. I agree with many of his articles. Well, thank you for that, Sandra. How about this from Jim on masks? Mark, masks are a religious garment, an indication of your devotion to the cause, and nothing to do with science, maths, or logic. My goodness. Well, look, I'll get to more of your thoughts on this one. Although, how about this from Andrew? Hi, Mark. Peter is the dullest, most undynamic, unconvincing fence sitter that I've ever seen on this great channel. Well, Andrew, it's all about opinions, and you're entitled to yours. Now, lots more to get through in the final few minutes of the show. Don't forget, we've got headliners at 11 with tomorrow's front pages. And before the end of this show, another great British game show. It's the end of the week, which can mean only one thing. Time for another thing to be cancelled. A senior barrister has called for court wigs to be banned, describing them as culturally insensitive and ridiculous. He was speaking after Michael Etienne, a black barrister with an afro, said he was told he could face disciplinary action if he did not wear his wig to court. So look, it begs the question, doesn't it, Josh, about whether you need these traditional garments in any of our institutions.
Sure, but I think this is just for the criminal court now, so they've got rid of it for the other courts.
Yeah.
But I think fair enough, this is tradition, there are arguments to have it, but they also already have dispensation for like the hijab and for turbans for Hindus. So I don't understand why there can't be a dispensation here.
Yeah. I mean, do you think they add something? Because I'm just wondering what the practical benefit of a wig is in a courtroom.
Well, look, we've got lots of traditions, but I think it's like 400 years old. I mean, let's not just chuck it out straight away.
What does it do?
I don't know, it just looks really cool. I mean, I'll tell you what it does. It came in because of, I think the French king was bald.
Right.
And so he made it fashionable, wigs. And personally, I'm all for I think let's bring more wigs back. Everybody should have a wig. I need a white wig, and then that's great. I'm loving it.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because I think we're of a similar generation, similar age, and
24.
Well, correct.
Yeah.
We grew up with men wearing wigs back in the day, didn't we? In the 70s and 80s, that was a thing. Men would wear a toupee.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was
TV
fine.
presenters.
I think let's make it socially acceptable again. Maybe next time you see me, I'm going to get a wig.
Well, listen, I wouldn't change a thing about your appearance. We know you're the eye candy on this show. Alice, what do you think? Bit of tradition? Bit of pomp and ceremony?
Yes, why not? You know, Britain, we have so many strange traditions, and that's part of our heritage. And I think we shouldn't be ashamed or trying to dispose of our traditions or which form part of our culture just because some people are displeased. I think that's just a bit ridiculous.
Well, yeah, that begs the question, what right do we have to change a 400-year-old tradition? I mean, that's my criticism of extreme political correctness and woke culture, is that why does this generation, why is it allowed to make judgment about Shakespeare or Dickens or historic statues when they've been there for centuries?
Not only that, but if you look around the world, it seems that almost every other country is allowed to celebrate their traditions and their culture and their heritage. The Japanese and Peru, where my mother's from, culture, tradition, what you've been passed down from your ancestors, that's something to be proud of. But in Britain, why is it that we're made to feel ashamed of our culture and our heritage? Why is it that we have to homogenise now suddenly?
So would you support things like the state opening of Parliament as well, the Queen in a horse-drawn carriage,
yeah, of course.
The mace, the black dog bashing against the door?
Yeah, Britain, I think we're the only people who ridicule our own traditions and our heritage. And I mean, it's okay to have a bit of a laugh, but when you're trying to just dismantle it for selfish reasons, it seems rather odd.
Do you think this is an example of Britain bashing, Chloe?
So I'm going to have to disagree with the others. The bar is very slow-moving. It's a lot of old men who don't understand modern technology. They very much struggled to understand Zoom in the pandemic. And so I'm not surprised that this old tradition is still mandatory in the criminal court. But I don't think it matters to just make it optional like they have done in the family and civil kits. It's not the case that we're going to lose all our tradition. I'm sure the majority of them will still continue to wear the stupid hairpiece that they wear. But it just means that people don't have to go through some painstaking process if their hairstyle doesn't allow them to wear one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the issue, isn't it? This particular young man who was complaining about them, he just said it wasn't very compatible with his hair. You could argue, Josh, that these wigs are sort of racist in a way.
Look, I mean...
Like everything else.
I find it very hard when someone's complaining about their hair. I think, what's the real prejudice here?
Yeah.
Really you've got hair, mate. Why don't you just be happy and grateful? Just praise the Lord for your hair. But yeah, look, I believe that person has dreadlocks. I don't think that that makes them racist because they don't fit with. You know, like I said, there is a process for dispensation, for getting this dispensation, and they should go with it. Yes, but at the same time, like Chloe says, maybe things need to become a little bit more relaxed. But maybe isn't that pomp and ceremony? Isn't that what people want in the criminal court? Isn't that part of
yeah,
the whole...
and Shakespeare said all the world's a stage, and I just wonder whether if you actually start getting rid of things like wigs in the courtroom and maybe, you know, in Parliament, you know, the Speaker doesn't wear those robes, you know, what's next? We get rid of ties, we get rid of suits, we can just turn up to Parliament or a court.
Sounds pretty good, pretty relaxed.
Yeah, well, that's the way we're headed.
Yeah.
Look at the youth of today. It's tracksuits, isn't it? Kind of. I mean, they're fine, obviously, at home, but I think that, yeah, it's nice to have a bit of pomp sometimes.
What do you think when you see friends, other young people dressing in a very casual way? Because it does surprise me from time to time, I've got to say.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think that there's something really lovely in having dignity and having pride in what you wear and dressing smart. And I think that it would be much nicer if my generation could appreciate that instead of just... Because I think it really does... Clothes do affect your demeanour, they affect the way you work, they affect, obviously, the way people see you and the way you present yourself and your confidence. So I think that clothes should be worn to add dignity to yourself.
Do you think we've got a bit slobby as a result of the pandemic? We've been sort of locked down on and off for a couple of years.
You're very insecure here.
Hello. No, that's like the most ironed shirt I've ever seen you wearing, Josh.
Yeah, but all my wife said was, Josh, just watch out, that T-shirt's a little bit see-through, make sure you hold your stomach in. But that's fine, as long as we cut at that angle, then... No, don't get... There we go. Stay that camera.
We're loving your abs. We're loving your abs. But what do you think, Chloe? Are we a bit slobby these days?
I think the pandemic has had its effect. I had to go to... a black tie party last night, and I thought, oh God, do I really have to put on a dress and tights again? I'm so out of the loop of it. But, you know, I think as you were saying, people want to have pride and dignity in what they're wearing, and you will have pride and dignity in what you're wearing if you chose to wear it, not when you go to school, oh, I have to put a school uniform on again. If it's not mandatory, people are more likely to wear something nice.
There you go. Well, let's keep it on kids because it's been 20 years since CBBC and CBeebies launched as their own respective channels. It's the home of classic shows like Tracy Beaker and Raven and CBeebies Bedtime Story, which I know Josh never misses. So this obviously will bring back many happy memories, but in the rise of more entertainment options in the age of streaming, is children's TV nowadays as good? Trying to think, who's the youngest on the panel?
Me!
You wish. Because Josh and I, we're just going to talk about Thomas the Tank Engine and Trumpton, aren't we?
Yeah, but
Rainbow.
But also, these guys don't have kids, so I can guarantee that I have watched way more.
You've got a foot in both camps, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got 5 kids, so I have watched more children's television than pretty much anybody in this entire building. I know it all.
Yeah.
And I
think it's actually affected your vocabulary, by the way.
Savage.
But it's. I think children's television now is fantastic. I think it's brilliant. I think it's super smart. It's very postmodern. It's very clever. I'm not saying all of it, but even from the little stuff that from like 3-4-year-olds, but the stuff that's for like 9, 10, 11-year-olds, there's Gumball, Adventure Time, Teen Titans, and then for the little ones, Spidey. There's great stuff. I mean, I watch a lot of TV with them because then I don't have to actually speak to them.
Yeah. And also, those shows, I mean, they're a better role model than you are, aren't they?
Absolutely.
The messaging is better.
Yeah, less violence.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, can you remember, were you, like, influenced by kids' TV, Chloe, growing up?
Yeah.
Did it make you the woman you are?
Of course. I think I grew up on things like Thunderbirds. Ooh. Absolute classic.
Oh!
That's Thunderbirds, but also stuff like Hannah Montana as well.
Okay.
I love that. But I'm just seeing all the rolling through all the old shows and remembering them. I've got things like 50-50. I loved 50-50.
Yeah.
That was so good.
Of course. And Thunderbirds. So you were watching reruns of a 60s show.
Yeah, that was...
That's not 60s, that's 80s.
Was it? Thunderbirds?
Oh, no, sorry, Thunderbirds. Sorry, I was thinking of Thundercats.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate, showing my age, yes. Sorry.
But, I mean, Thunderbirds, I mean, that's vintage, isn't it?
Yeah, well, my dad absolutely loved it, so he insisted that we grew up on that. And my younger brother, who's 7 years younger than me, he was also forced to sit through all the Thunderbirds as well.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Thunderbirds, I would also cite Paddington, the original Paddington show, which was done...
Darkest Prue.
What was that?
Paddington from Deepest Darkest Prue.
Absolutely.
It's very rare Prue. comes up, so I was always excited.
It's nice to get a big... So what, you've got connections to Peru, do you?
Oh, my mum's Peruvian.
Amazing.
So my...
And she likes marmalade.
It's perfect. So Paddington is like a national hero.
Yeah, for sure.
Is he sort of talked about in Peru? Does he have profile there?
I don't know, actually.
He ought to be. He's their greatest son, isn't he?
Yeah.
But if you think about how that show was made originally, the Paddington show. I mean, the movie's great entertainment, but the show was just done in this very sort of static animation. I mean, it was a bit like reading the book, but just on telly.
I quite like that.
And I think I quite appreciate, I also would mention Trumpton and you mentioned Thunderbirds, but I wonder whether kids' TV in the 60s and 70s was slower. Because certainly if you watch American cartoons, I just think they're so fast-moving. I worry for kids watching that stuff.
No, me too. I loved growing up with Mr. Men from the 70s, and also Bod.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, does anyone ever Bod?
Of course.
He was so cute, and I loved it. So, yeah.
You've all got very retro parents.
Yeah, no, my parents
Is that in your dad's collection,
yes,
Bod?
Yeah, Bod. My dad loved it. So he wanted me to grow up with that too. And I think sometimes even video games, just the other day, my sister brought a friend over, they were playing some video games, and I came in for a bit just to see what it was like, and the screen just drove me mad. It was so many things coming at you. I just feel like these poor kids these days are being inundated with flashing, and I don't know, it's a bit crazy.
Yeah, it is a bit crazy. Brilliant stuff. Well, for proper grown-up TV, why don't you keep it GB News? We've got lots to come, including a proper catch-up with your emails, because I want to get back to everything that you've been engaging with tonight. We've got so many subjects on the go. So we'll get to your emails after this, and another great British game show. Don't forget, headliners with two top comedians looking at tomorrow's papers after 11. So I'll see you very shortly. Don't go anywhere.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Visited.
There's 3.
Oh my goodness, so many emails coming in. Big reaction to my interview with Peter Hitchens, the Mail on Sunday columnist. This from Barbara, who says, "Dear Mark, Peter Hitchens is a very clever chappie and talks a lot of sense, but he needs a bit of a tickle or something, as he could bore the pants off you. Dare I say, get a life, please." Tough love there from Barbara. Barbara, you know I love getting your emails. Love all of your emails, folks. Some very positive comments in relation to clothing and apparel for Alice's blazer tonight. So Alice, big up your sartorial elegance. Of course, Chloe looks fabulous too. And it's just nice that Josh is here. It's just his personality, really, isn't it? How about this for kids' TV? Steve says, bring back Captain Pugwash. Elizabeth, Mark, we grew up without a TV, but watched Lassie and Rainbow at my grand's. I loved Zippy. And on wigs and ties. Andrew says, Dear Mark, I don't believe... Mark, I don't believe you would be shocked if we got rid of ties. They are a ridiculously useless piece of sexist clothing. Women can wear quite rightly what they want, and so can we as long as it is a suit and tie. How sexist and unequal is that? Burn the tie for men's lib. There you go, Andrew. There's a new idea, men's lib. I wonder if that one will catch on. If I've got time, I will read a couple of emails. Actually, let me just get to this from Francis, another brilliant email. Francis says, Hi, Mark. CBBC and other current children's TV shows talk down to kids. And she goes on to develop her point, which I'll come to shortly once I've charged up my laptop. Now, let's move on to our Great British Game Show. So excited about this. Yes, indeed, it's time for the Great British Game Show, in which we're going to play a game of Meet the Parents. So we're very excited about this. Let me explain. Today, we are going to play a game called Meet the Parents. On the day it was announced that Cristiano Ronaldo's son has joined the Manchester United Academy. That's right. Can he live up to his father's great footballing skills? Well, good luck to young Ronaldo, but it's inspired tonight's Great British Game Show. I want to see if our panel and you at home can match the famous child to the famous parent. So let's take a look at our first kid that's got a famous parent. Right.
Brooklyn Beckham.
It's Brooklyn Beckham, whose father is...
Michael Jackson.
That was fun, David.
Good guess. There you go. Bex. It's Posh and Bex, that's right. Let's go to our next famous kid.
Are these all going to be Posh and Bex?
I'm afraid they are. Some of them were your kids, by the way.
Yeah, cool.
Right, now, who is that the daughter of?
Michael
She's
Jackson.
very beautiful. It is Michael Jackson's daughter. Do you know what her name is for an extra point? Yeah.
Wow.
What, did you just, recognise
I was just
the
gonna
similarity?
say Michael Jackson for everybody.
Yeah, he was just joking.
My goodness, so that was Paris Jackson, Michael Jackson's daughter.
Okay.
How about this next one? Who is her father?
Oh.
I can't say the name because it will give away. They share a surname. She herself... No. Okay. Nice try. They are both singers. Her father was a famous singer. She's a famous singer. Well done, Frank Sinatra's the right answer. That was, of course... Any idea what she was called?
Nancy Sinatra.
Nancy Sinatra. These boots are made for walking. What a great tune. OK, how about this? Here's our next famous kid.
Oh, Keith Sutherland. Donald Sutherland's son.
Donald Sutherland's father. That's right. Who's your favourite Sutherland?
Oh, that's so tricky. I love 24.
Yeah, exactly.
And Body Snatchers. Is that Donald Sutherland?
And Donald Sutherland, I don't know about that, but he was in MASH the movie, which was incredible, and lots of other great classics. But there you go. Next up, we've got another famous child, a famous daughter.
Yeah. What's his name?
So who's she?
Angelina Jolie.
Angelina Jolie. Who's her father?
Oh, he's a famous actor who,
Chloe, you must have watched... You're a student. You probably only watched movies last 3 years.
Everybody
I actually have no idea. I'm terrible at this.
Oh, come on.
I'm good with faces, but terrible with names.
Angelina Jolie's father. Alice, any ideas? No. He was in a movie, I think, called The Champ, wasn't he?
Yeah, The Champ, and the one with Dustin Hoffman, which was where...
Tootsie?
No, not Tootsie. Come on,
Rain Man.
No, he's in New York, and he's walking around the streets of New York, and he's a gigolo. It's a great movie.
Well, let's reveal all. It is indeed, but we don't know what he's called. Well, he's called John Voight.
Oh, my gosh!
John Voight, there we go.
So terrible.
No idea.
Who's raised eyebrows by, I think, being very supportive of Donald Trump.
Yeah,
there you go. It's all about
opinion.
opinions, isn't it? Good luck to him. One of the famous movies, of course, that was mentioned just there was Midnight Cowboy.
Come on, my favourite. That's why I became a gigolo.
There you go. It's not going very well, is it?
Not since the hair. I've got to get that wig back.
We're working on it.
I'm a lawyer.
Let's have our next famous kid. Right, it's a young man.
Tom Hanks, easy peasy.
How did you know that?
Colin Hanks. He's a really good actor, Colin Hanks.
Could there be anything worse than having a famous father and you go into the same business? Because Colin Hanks is an actor as well. If I was Tom Hanks' son, I'd want to be, I don't know, a butcher or something, a bus driver, just anything except being an actor. So I wouldn't be compared.
Kids, and the other ones are, they aren't all actors, but I guess some of them I guess it's bad when they're not good at it, but Colin Hanks actually is a good actor.
Yeah.
So
I think it'd be a lot of pressure.
It'd be a lot of
Got
pressure.
to live up to a very high standard.
Yeah, that's the
Tom
problem.
Hanks is so nice. That's the real pressure.
Yeah.
It's like everyone's going to think you're nice. How horrible.
I mean, it flips both ways. You can either have a famous acting parent and you're part of a dynasty, like the Fox family and others. And actually the next one that's coming up in this game. But the flip side is sometimes you're in the shadow of that person. You just never match up. We've seen that, haven't we? You know, and I think audiences don't like nepotism. They don't like to feel the person on the big screen is just there because of their DNA.
Yeah, but you had Kirk Douglas, Michael Douglas, and then his son, Cameron, tried to be an actor and he was rubbish.
Well, it's funny you should say that because it takes us to our next famous
Michael
kid.
Douglas!
You've nailed it. And that's Michael Douglas, who was a great actor. I mean, arguably as successful as his father Kirk,
I
if
would
not
say
more.
successful, yeah. But but Kirk Douglas was massive in the Golden
And then
era.
what was the grandson called?
Cameron.
Cameron.
Who I actually knew.
Not you knew him.
Yeah, well, I know him. Yeah.
Yeah. And is he annoyed having like such famous parents?
He's not doing very well.
No. That's right, hasn't he?
That's why I know him.
I think he's had some well-reported issues,
some
hasn't
issues.
he?
Yeah.
Well, we wish him well. Hopefully,
No,
inherit
he's
a
not
few
a
quid.
particularly nice guy. I wouldn't worry about.
Is that right? Oh, sod him then.
Don't stress it.
How about this? Another famous kid.
Sofia Coppola.
Sofia Coppola, whose father is
Francis Ford Coppola. My guys, watch The Godfather. Get out of here. When you leave here tonight, please go and watch some movies.
That's right. You're going to have to provide a reading list.
Although
for
say
my
that,
fans.
Mark and I used to work at Sky Movies together, so we
did.
So we should really know our stuff.
No, back when we were desperate.
Oh yeah.
Now, how about this? And this is going back many years. A truly historic figure. Now, who is that famous child? It's a black and white photograph. He's got fair hair. He's got very penetrating eyes. He's wearing he's like a man of letters. He's got his fountain pen out, and his father was a key figure in the war.
Winston Churchill.
Yes, Winston Churchill, and that is Randolph Churchill, who wrote his father's memoirs. There we are.
There we go.
Okay, another couple of quick ones before we go. How about this?
Gascoigne.
Tilly who?
Yeah.
Tilly Ramsey, whose father, of course, is Gordon Ramsay.
There we go.
And then we've got one more, have we? Yes, we do. Right, now there's a handsome young man. Or he's androgynous. He could be a woman, couldn't he? He's very pretty, like a beautiful man-woman. It's Elizabeth Hurley's son. He is called Damien Hurley, and his mum is the gorgeous Liz. There you go. There you go. That brings the game show to its conclusion. My thanks to my fantastic panel tonight, my amazing team, including Stephen and the gang, for putting together a great show, and for you for watching. Stick around because I'll be in the host chair for Headliners after this.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGiven. Dry for much of the time in the southeast during the next 24 hours, but turning wetter and windier elsewhere. However, as that wet and windy weather arrives, it brings with it milder air. Cold air is ahead of these weather fronts as they push into parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland